It didn't happen slowly. It happened all at once. But this city once looked perfect, until something changed and no one questioned it. The few who saw it were pushed aside. They were warned clearly. But when the moment came, it was too late. Because some consequences don't wait. There was a city, unlike any other. From a distance, it looked perfect, strong, beautiful, alive. Its streets were filled with life, its people confident, successful. Everything about it spoke of prosperity, of security, of power. And for those who entered, it offered something rare, a place to belong, a place to thrive. There was no fear here, no visible struggle, only comfort, only abundance. And that made it desirable. People didn't just live here, they wanted to be here. Because in a world full of uncertainty, this city seemed certain, unshaken, untouchable. But perfection can be deceiving. Because beneath the surface, something was missing. Not wealth, not beauty, but something deeper, something unseen. At first, no one noticed, or perhaps no one wanted to, because everything still worked, life still moved forward, the city still stood. And when everything appears stable, people stop asking questions, they stop looking closer, they stop wondering what lies beneath. But not everyone was convinced. Some saw it, not clearly, but enough to feel it. A quiet tension, a subtle shift, something that didn't belong. And yet the city continued, unaware, unbothered, unchanged. Or at least, that's how it seemed. At first, nothing seemed different. The city still stood, the streets were still full, life continued, as it always had. But something had shifted, not enough to alarm, not enough to stop anything, just enough to feel. People spoke less, laughed less, connected less, and yet no one questioned it, because everything still worked, everything still looked right. And when things appear normal, people accept them, even when they feel wrong. The change wasn't loud, it didn't demand attention. It settled in quietly, almost unnoticed, almost accepted. And that's what made it dangerous.
The fires burn brighter! Join the dance!
Feel the heat! Louder!
Because once something becomes normal, it stops being questioned. Behavior shifted, slowly, subtly. What once felt wrong no longer did. What once raised concern was ignored. Not because people didn't see it, but because they chose not to. It was easier that way, easier to continue, easier to belong, easier to accept. And over time, acceptance becomes agreement, and agreement becomes culture. Until one day, no one remembers that anything ever changed. Except for a few, the ones who noticed, the ones who felt it, the ones who knew this wasn't how it used to be. But their voices were not the loudest, and in this city, the loudest voices were the ones no one questioned. At some point, the change stopped feeling new. It stopped feeling wrong, and instead it became normal. Not because it was right, but because it was everywhere. Behavior that once raised concern was now ignored, not hidden, not denied, simply accepted. And when something is repeated enough, it loses its weight, its meaning, its consequence. People no longer reacted, they adjusted, they adapted, they blended in. Because standing out became uncomfortable. And in a city where belonging meant everything, no one wanted to feel out of place. So they followed, not out of agreement, but out of ease. And slowly, what once felt unnatural became expected. This is how change takes hold. Not through force, but through repetition, through exposure, through silence. Because when no one speaks against something, it begins to feel acceptable. And when it feels acceptable, it becomes culture. The loudest voices set the tone, and in this city, those voices were not questioned. They were followed, even by those who doubted, even by those who knew something wasn't right. Because resistance carries a cost. Isolation, rejection, discomfort. And most people choose comfort, even when it comes at a price. And so the city continued, louder, bolder, further than before, unaware that the line had already been crossed. And once crossed, there is no clear way back. Not everyone adapted. Not everyone changed. Some noticed, some resisted. And because of that, they no longer belonged. At first, the separation was subtle, a feeling, a difference, something unspoken. But over time, it became visible, clear, unavoidable. They stood apart, not by choice, but by conviction. And in a city where everything moved together, standing still made you stand out. People saw them, but not with understanding, with discomfort, with suspicion. Because difference is not easily accepted, especially in a place where conformity had become the norm. And the more the city changed, the more these individuals felt it. The more they knew this wasn't how things were meant to be. But knowing came at a cost. Because once you see something clearly, you cannot ignore it. You cannot return to what feels wrong. And that isolates you, it separates you, not just from the system, but from the people within it. Voices that once mattered were no longer heard. Concerns that once meant something were dismissed, laughed at, ignored. And over time, silence replaces influence, and isolation replaces belonging. But even then, they remained, watching, waiting, holding on to something the city had lost, something the crowd no longer valued. Because while the majority moved forward, they stood still, not out of fear, but out of truth. And in a place where truth is unwelcome, those who carry it become outsiders. Then came the warning. Not hidden, not subtle, clear, direct, impossible to ignore. A voice rose above the noise, speaking truth into a city that no longer wanted to hear it. At first, people listened, not because they believed, but because it was different, unexpected, uncomfortable. But as the words continued, so did the resistance. Because truth does not always feel right, especially in a place built on acceptance. The message challenged everything the city had become, everything people had accepted. And when something threatens what people are used to, they don't question it, they reject it. Not carefully, not thoughtfully, but immediately. Because change, even when necessary, is not always welcome. The reactions were predictable. Some laughed, some dismissed it, some grew angry. But very few actually listened. Because listening requires reflection, and reflection reveals truth, and truth demands change. And change comes with a cost most were not willing to pay. So they turned away, back to what felt familiar, back to what felt comfortable, even if it was wrong, even if it led somewhere dangerous. And as the warning echoed, it began to fade. Not because it stopped, but because it was drowned out by noise, by distraction, by choice. And in the end, the message was not rejected because it was unclear. It was rejected because it was understood. The warning did not go unanswered. It was rejected, not quietly, not passively, but with force. Because once truth challenges what people have accepted, it becomes a threat, and threats are not tolerated. The city that once ignored the message now turned against it. Voices grew louder, not in understanding, but in opposition. The same people who once listened now resisted, because the message had crossed a line. It demanded something. It required change. And change was no longer an option they were willing to consider. So instead of adjusting, they pushed back, harder, stronger, together. And when resistance becomes collective, it becomes powerful and dangerous.
If we move, they will turn on us. But we cannot just watch this. Look at him, he's not fighting back.
The tone shifted from dismissal to hostility, from laughter to anger. Because once people feel exposed, they react, not with reflection, but with defense. And defense quickly becomes aggression. The message was no longer something to ignore. It was something to eliminate, something to silence. Because as long as it remained, it reminded them of what they knew, what they felt, what they chose to ignore. And that reminder was unbearable. So the city made a decision, not spoken, but clear. Truth would not be welcomed here, not now, not ever. And once a place rejects truth completely, it sets itself on a path that cannot be reversed. Then they arrived. Not with noise, not with force, but with presence. Calm, steady, unshaken. In a city filled with chaos, they stood different, noticeably different. And yet they did not announce themselves. They did not demand attention. They simply walked. And somehow, that was enough. Because in a place where everything had become loud, their silence stood out. People noticed. Not all, but enough.
Why does he
Some
cover his
stared,
face?
some felt it, a shift, a change in atmosphere, something unfamiliar. Because this kind of presence did not belong here. And that is what made it powerful. It did not match the city, it challenged it without saying a word. The city continued, unchanged on the surface, but beneath something had begun. Because when something pure enters a place that has lost its way, it exposes everything. Not loudly, not immediately, but undeniably. The contrast becomes clear. What once felt normal now feels heavy. What once felt right now feels questioned. And even those who had accepted everything began to feel it. A quiet discomfort, a subtle awareness. Something was not aligned. But instead of stopping, the city pushed forward. Because recognition does not always lead to change. sometimes it leads to resistance. And as the visitors moved deeper into the city, so did the tension, because their presence was not just a sign, it was a beginning. The night felt different, heavier, closer, as if something was approaching and there was no time left. The city continued as it always had, unaware, unwilling, unchanged. But for a few, everything had shifted. The visitors moved quickly now, no longer observing, but acting, guiding, leading, because what was coming could not be delayed, and those who understood felt it, a pressure, an urgency, a need to move, to leave, to separate. But leaving is never easy, not when everything you know is behind you, not when everything familiar is at risk. And yet, the moment demanded it. Outside, the city grew louder, more restless, more unstable, as if reacting to something it could not control. The crowd gathered, not in understanding, but in resistance. Because when something begins to slip away, people hold on tighter, even when what they hold on to is already broken. But inside, there was a different atmosphere, quiet, focused, certain, because the decision had been made. There was no more waiting, no more warning, only action, only movement, because once the moment arrives, there is no turning back. And those who hesitated risked everything, because this night was not just another night. It was the last. The moment had come. There was no more waiting, no more hesitation, only movement. They were told to leave, to go forward, without turning back. And so they did, step by step, moving away from everything they knew, everything familiar, everything they had built their lives around. Because leaving is never just physical, it is emotional, it is mental, it is a separation from what once felt secure. And even when the danger is clear, the pull of the past remains strong. The city stood behind them, still, silent, unchanged in appearance,
Keep moving. Don't
but
look
no
back.
longer safe. And as the distance
getting
grew,
smaller, we're
so
really
did the
leaving
weight
it all
of what they
behind.
were leaving behind.
Stay together. We
Moving
can't stop
forward
now.
required trust, not in what they could see, but in what they were told. Because ahead, there was nothing certain, no comfort, no guarantee, only direction. And sometimes direction is all you have. But behind them was something stronger. Memory, attachment, a life they once understood. And for some, that pull was overwhelming. The desire to look back, to hold on, to see one last time. But they were warned, because some moments do not allow reflection. Some decisions must remain final. And as they moved farther away, the line was drawn between what was left behind and what lay ahead. And once that line is crossed, there is no return. And then it happened. Not gradually, not slowly, but all at once. The silence broke. The sky responded. And what had been building could no longer be held back. The city that once stood strong began to fall, not because it was weak, but because it had ignored every warning, every sign, every moment that could have changed its course. Panic spread too late. Movement began, but direction was lost. Because when the moment finally arrives, preparation matters, and this city was not prepared. Everything that felt permanent proved fragile. Everything that felt secure began to collapse. And in a matter of moments, what once seemed untouchable was no longer standing. This was not random, it was not sudden. It was the result of everything that came before, every ignored warning, every dismissed truth, every step taken further away from what was right, all leading here, to this moment, where nothing could be undone and nothing could be stopped. Because some outcomes are not immediate, they build, they wait, until the time comes. And when it does, it is final. The city was gone, not just physically, but completely, erased, leaving behind only silence, only memory, only a warning. Because what happened here was not just destruction, it was a consequence. And consequences do not forget.